film on him now. The Big Ten rotates 3-star guys and plays. When he played at these smaller group of 5 conferences, they don't always rotate guys, and they get tired from Scott Frost's pace of play and how fast he does. I just don't see it yet this year. A defense that ranked, in the 90s? I think it was 96th last year out of 130 teams, worse than some of the lower conferences, lower teams like that. And just to say, give them 10-1, 15-1 at the best I've seen to win the Big Ten is way too much. I'd rather pick Iowa there. Once again, I think they're a year away. I like Taylor Martinez. I like what Scott Frost is doing, but this is the Big Ten. Let's see what happens. I actually have them at 7.5 wins when the win total is 8. Not enough, but what are your thoughts, Kyle?
Yeah, most of them are 8.5 now on the win total. So definitely Nebraska's got a lot of hype going into the year. And I'll tell you, I took a really close look at Nebraska here this week, and I went into it not wanting to like Nebraska because everybody is hyping Nebraska so much. I have to tell you, the thing that concerns me is I think the schedule sets up really well for them as far as if I was going to take an under on a season win total, I'd be nervous here. Nebraska has their bigger games at home. They only have to play at Maryland. Purdue will be down some this year. Minnesota's a tough game, certainly. And then at Illinois, at Colorado in the non-conference, Colorado not very good now. The other thing about Nebraska, they went 4-8 last year, but they had 6.31 yards per play on offense, 5.81 yards per play allowed on defense, half a yard to the positive. That suggests some regression to the mean here in a positive way for Nebraska. I think Nebraska is a tough team because ATS, I'd probably like to look to go against them based on the hype. Season win total, I would lean to the over just because I think it sets up favorably. I'm not going to be invested on Nebraska in the preseason.
They have the second easiest schedule in the Big Ten behind Minnesota, because they get Ohio State rather than Penn State. I think it's better to get Penn State, but they do at least get Ohio State at home, Wisconsin at home, Iowa at home. They go to Minnesota and at Maryland, at Purdue. So yes, I think this is the second easiest schedule, but that's why I didn't touch it. So I agree with you there, man. Go ahead.
One more point I want to make there that I forgot to make here on the offense in Nebraska. Maurice Washington, a lot of question marks for him as far as legal problems. Is he going to be there in the backfield? That's pretty important to this team. The other thing I would say, Adrian Martinez, very good quarterback. Scott Frost has been talking him up like crazy. Look at the depth chart behind him, though. He really needs to stay healthy. They would not be nearly as good without him. It always worries me to see somebody that is so much better than the rest of the guys behind him. So, with Martinez having some injuries in the past, that's something that would worry me about investing too much in Nebraska, too. If he's out, you're in big trouble.
100% agree, my man. All right. Well, the rest of the Big Ten teams we'll just kind of touch on unless you have something you really want to talk about for sake of time here. The next one I have Northwestern with Pat Fitzgerald. And, this team overachieved a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And losing, I never seen anyone lose all their non-conference games and then go ahead and win their side of the division like they did. It was like a lot of things went their way. Turnovers went their way. They only averaged 4.74 yards per play on offense and gave up 5.57. They were a net negative 0.83 yards per play. Now, I will say that they had a very tough schedule. The most intriguing thing to me, now they did lose a quarterback, obviously, Thorson, but they bring this guy in, Hunter Johnson, a transfer from Clemson that was, I think, a 5-star at one time. But obviously, when you're going against guys like Trevor Lawrence there and Kelly Bryant the year before, a little hard for him to get any ground there. But I never see Northwestern pull in a guy like that, or at least not for a long time. They still have Isaiah Bowser at running back. I hate going against Pat Fitzgerald. They kind of have a medium schedule. Their season win total is at 6.5. My number is 7. Not taking any futures. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, well, I'm going to echo what you just said about Pat Fitzgerald. I think he's a tremendous coach. I don't want to go against him. If I had to bet this season win total, though, I would take the under here. I think Northwestern was just so much of an overachiever last year. I mean, you can't have the type of offense that they had last year and expect to win the Big Ten West, especially as it improves now. This is an improving division, certainly some really good coaches in the Big Ten West. I think it's really a fascinating division. 4.74 yards per play last year with a good quarterback. The thing is, Hunter Johnson is the wild card here, like you said. I mean, he was rated so highly. Like you said, I believe he was a 5-star. I know he was rated, top 3 or 4 quarterback in his class. This is a guy that was really highly recruited. Now Northwestern gets him. The problem is the offensive line in front of him is terrible. It's really bad. It might be the worst offensive line in the Big Ten. And there are some bad teams in the Big Ten. So he's going to have a lot of pressure on him. It's not going to be easy. There's not much of a running game here. Northwestern has a good defense. I would look to go against Northwestern ATS, thinking that they could be a bit overvalued from what they did last season. But I have to say, like you said, I'm not excited to go against Pat Fitzgerald.
Yeah, absolutely. He's proven us wrong before, so 100% agreement there. So I'm going to get a lot of tweets and texts from emails from people who are Penn State fans now because of how low I have them right under Northwestern here around the 10-ish range. Power rating wise, all this is subject to change. It's still early, but this team lost a ton of production. They lost Trace McSorley, which I had such a high, value on him. I thought he was a fantastic quarterback for college football. What he did for this team, some of the comebacks he made. They lost Juwan Johnson, a stud wide receiver that was always seemed to be open at the right time. They lost Miles Sanders. They have a new guy coming in. I think Ricky Slade or Journey Brown might be that. I think it's going to be Slade. I don't know. I got to tell you, man, I said that this team would be worse without Joe Moorhead last year. They did win a lot of games last year. I think they were somewhere around 10 or 11 wins or something last year, if I remember correctly. But I think this is where Joe Moorhead's loss reels its ugly head, because it's okay to lose your offensive coordinator when you still got your quarterback there, your number one running back, top receiver. They know the plays. They know what they've been taught. But now this is all on James Franklin here. This is where I think it rears its ugly head. Their season win total is 8.5. They still have to play at Ohio State, at Michigan State, and they get Michigan at home. That could be 3 losses right there. And to tell me that they're going to run the rest of their schedule is pretty big. So just need one more loss there. I'm taking under 8.5. My number 7. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, you might say that they will sorely miss their quarterback from last year. Sorry, I had to. But, this is McSorley was a great quarterback. Like you said, he was really, really good for this program. The problem for them was they thought Stevens was going to step right in. And then Stevens transfers in the spring. And it's like, what do we do now? Mm-hmm. When now we've got Sean Clifford, who they did not expect to be their starting quarterback. I think this offense is way down from last year. I don't think it's even close to a year ago. The thing that helps them, their defense is certainly very good, very aggressive defense, a lot of blitzes, some good defensive linemen that can really rush the quarterback well. I think the first thing that stands out to me about Penn State this year is I'd like to play unders in the games. I think that they might be totaled a little bit too high here. Being a big totals guy, I think unders will have some value, especially at the beginning of the season on them. They're weaker on offense, stronger on defense. Let's also see what kind of tempo they play at. But as far as the season win total, I have to take the under here if I take anything. It's hard for me to see them winning 9 games, losing as much as they did. If so, it'll all be the defense. And the final thing I'll say about this is James Franklin's kind of an interesting coach to rate. I like to try to, when I'm going through the power ratings, pretty aggressive with how I rate coaches. I think Franklin's a good coach. I think some people might have him a bit overvalued, though. He has made some really big errors late in games that's cost Penn State a couple games. I think Franklin is a good coach and not a great coach.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the same. And we'll see if he proves me wrong this year. But under 8.5, I felt pretty comfortable taking. Now, obviously, you're right about the defense. They should be better. They only have 4.72 yards per play allowed. But as we all know, you can play great defense. But if your offense throws that pick six, if your offense is turning it over on the other side of the field, I don't care how good your defense is, you're giving up points there. So that's the scary thing about a team that just has a bunch of defense. But hey, they were at 1.4 plus net yards per play last year, and that was with McSorley. If they can get anywhere close to 6.1 yards per play, then I will definitely be wrong on this one. Moving on to Indiana, I have them around the 5 range. Tom Allen always has an uphill battle sitting in the Big Ten East. I always feel sorry for him whenever I start talking about the Big Ten and handicapping. I'm like, man, does he have it tough. He does return Peyton Ramsey, pretty capable quarterback, lots of games around his belt. I like their receiver, Nick Westbrook, Donovan Hale, they return their tight end, Peyton Hendershot. As a matter of fact, this team returns a ton of production, 78% on offense, 77% on defense. They were a net minus 5.5 yards per play last year, but we'll see if that gets any better. I'm definitely not touching them on any futures market, but I think Indiana could be a sneaky ATS team. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Indiana, it's hard to see them getting above their season win total of 6.5. They return a lot of players on defense, but they really weren't very good. So, I think offensively they're going to improve. Peyton Ramsey might even be on a short leash. You got Michael Penix, a really highly recruited guy. Tuttle also, who transferred in. They have plenty of talent at quarterback. I think might look to play some overs with Indiana if they keep playing at the type of tempo that they've played in recent years. They were 20th in the nation in tempo last year out of 130 teams. So I would look for some high-scoring games from them. Their offensive line is their weakness on the offensive end. Defensively, they're just not very good in general. Gave up 6 yards per play last year. I'm not terribly high on Indiana, and especially with the type of teams that they have to play in the East, like you said.
Yeah, definitely not worth a further discussion on this one. Let's move on to the next team I have, and it's Purdue. Speaking about this Purdue, they beat Indiana last year, taking Indiana out of bowl contention. And I kind of thought that this was a perfect spot for Indiana last year, and I was wrong. Purdue was great last year on the offensive side of the ball. They had this kid named Rondale Moore, and he was only a freshman last year, and he was just burning people. If you saw him in the Ohio State game, I think I think someone we know is at that game as well, right, Kyle? And,
I think I know somebody that was at that game. Yeah.
So, they return Elijah Sindelar, but they lost David Blow, and I'm telling you right now, I am not a Sindelar fan. I don't think he's the correct guy to quarterback there. As a matter of fact, I think he might lose his starting job this year after the season gets started. Too much turnover. They only return 37% of production on offense, and they return 72% on defense. But this is a defense, that gave up 5.99 yards per play. So not too excited there. I think, and it sucks because I love Jeff Brom. I think he's a great coach, and he had a reason to not go to Louisville. He had a big reason. And it's staying here, so maybe he's got something in his pocket. But their season win total 7, my number 6, not quite enough to fade Jeff Brom here. What are your thoughts on this team?
I like the season win total under. This is one of my favorites here from this conference. I hate liking that because I really like Jeff Brom a lot. I think he's a tremendous coach. I think Holt's a really good defensive coordinator as well. Didn't have that much to work with last year. I think the defense will be better than they were last season. Offensively, though, a lot of question marks. Rondale Moore is a superstar. Just burned Ohio State really badly in that game. Purdue offensively has to regress, though. Blau did a good job there at quarterback. They have some good receivers, obviously. Rondale Moore, not the only one. They have some other really good receivers there. David Bell, a freshman, that's going to be a big name there at Purdue. My question mark for Purdue, their offensive line's not very good. They don't have a running game. So Sindelar has had some problems with decision-making in the past. We know he has a cannon for an arm. He can throw the ball really hard. He has the tools, but he's made poor decisions. I think that's concerning, knowing that they're not going to have a running game and they're going to have a pass rush on him quite a bit. Purdue's schedule's not very easy either in the Big Ten. You play at Penn State, at Iowa, at Northwestern, at Wisconsin. Not an easy schedule by any means for Purdue. I think it's hard to see them getting to 7. And if they get to 7, I'd be really surprised if they get to 8. So I'll take under 7 for Purdue.
Well, you know what, Kyle? I think you just talked me into it. I think that's a great play now that you broke it down a little bit there. And I had them 1 game under, but maybe I just wasn't quite there, and I'm there now. So I agree with you there. Let's look at the under on Purdue here. Moving on to Maryland here. what a crazy team. I could not believe last year when they kept it tight with Ohio State. That was so interesting to watch at the end in overtime, losing on that 2-point conversion,